Hey folks, how's it going? Rob Avis here. I'm here with Tyler Hermanson, a buddy of mine from Calgary, and he runs a company called 4 Elements. And as you guys know, we're in the process of designing out a permaculture farm, but the first thing we start with is Zone 0, which is right around the house here. So I called Tyler up and said, hey Tyler, would you mind coming out here and giving me a sense of how crappy our house actually is? We have been burning wood like it is going out of style, which is great because we've got 100 acres of forest, but ultimately we don't want to be, chopping as many trees down, specifically because of the labor. But also, I mean, wood does have a pollution factor associated with it as well from a particulate perspective. So the less work we have to put in, the better, because work is just a failure in design. So Tyler, walk me through what we're going to do today to get an assessment of the house. And probably a lot of people have never really thought about what's involved in doing an energy audit. So make sure you're bringing it down to the level of a newbie, basically, so that folks can kind of get their heads around what you're going to do. And folks, we're going to, not only is Tyler going to explain it, but we're actually going to follow him through as he does the process, and he's going to show us kind of some of the weak points in a house as we kind of go through that process. So take us through kind of what you do to get that assessment.
So this is an energy evaluation. It's an independent assessment of the house for its energy consumption, and we're looking at how the house is operating as a system. So we look at the windows, the walls, the envelope of the house, and also the mechanicals that go in it. That all is fed into a computer simulation, computer program of the house, to let us see where that energy is going, where your big losses are, which is really your big opportunities. So in Canada we have the EnerGuide system, which this evaluation is based on. In the States you have the HERS rating system, similar idea. But it starts with an assessment of the house for size, shape, age, conditions, R values, age of the mechanical systems and ventilation. Then we're going to do a blower door test. So that's actually an air tightness measurement of the house using a calibrated fan. We're going to suck the air out, measure how much air comes back in. And by knowing the air tightness of the house, we really refine the quality of the energy model, because air leakage is 20 to 30% of your energy loss right there. So by doing a really careful assessment of the air leakage, we improve the accuracy of the energy model.
Or 50% in our case.
Might be higher. It ranges a lot. We've tested houses that are 14 air change per hour. So an air change is it was one of the metrics we use to measure air tightness, and it's the entire volume of air in the house swapped out how many times in an hour. So an older, leakier house might have a 7 air change, 14 air change. The tightest houses we're testing now have 0.3 air changes per hour. So once you get control of that air leakage, the house immediately becomes a lot more comfortable, because you don't have the same cold drafts always cycling through. You don't have your heating system turning on all the time. You're not hauling 10 cords of wood into the house. But once we tighten that house up, we have to pay attention to ventilation. So the next thing we look at is how much fresh air you have coming into the house, what your combustion safety risks are. And then the next thing we want to look at is R values, how efficiently the walls are performing, the windows are performing, and then the mechanical system making up that heat. All that has to be looked at as a system, because they all affect each other. You tighten up the envelope, but you don't look at your ventilation system, you have sick building syndrome. Right? You have stuffy rooms and nobody sleeps well. You change the windows, you get overheating in the summer, right? So the energy modeling is looking at all that, helping us find those balances.
So I've suspected that we had a lot of these issues, and so as part of the design process, I've actually got an as-built set of drawings now, so I've measured all the areas. We know we have a window schedule, we have a door schedule, and we've started planning what we want our house to look like when we're done with it, even though we don't necessarily understand what the sequence is going to look like. And so Tyler's got some really neat kit that he's going to show us today. He's got an IR camera, so we're going to be able to measure infrared or do infrared photography. So as we're depressurizing or pressurizing the building, whichever way we go, we can actually measure the change in temperature and see where the air is coming out. And so once, and Tyler mentioned this, once we have a good sense of kind of where those weak links are, we can systematically sequence the kind of weakest link first and then start knocking off stuff sequentially in a way that makes most sense, so in a way that's going to get us the biggest bang for the buck, so to speak.
We don't want to miss any opportunities, right? We get called out to some renovations, right, where the siding's already been redone, but they didn't add enough new insulation. You're like, well, you can't go back now and add that insulation, and that's just a lost opportunity.
Totally.
But that would have been one of the low-hanging fruits that you missed, because you didn't go through that assessment process.
Right. So we're going to walk through the process with Tyler now, and we'll probably stop and have a little bit of commentary as we go through. We will be putting a link to Tyler's website down below, so while you're kind of watching, if you want to sneak over and look at his website, you can check out his link below as well.
Lots of good information there. Make sure to check it out.
And yeah, so let's get into it, Tyler.
Okay. So one hose goes outside as our reference pressure. We're measuring 50 pascals inside to outside relative. And that's a consistent pressure that we use in all of these tests. Make sure everything is comparable.
So what are you doing here with this frame?
So this frame is going to hold our blower door, give it a seal, and this is where because our fan is so big, so this frame always replaces one of the doors. Holds our equipment and seals the opening. When we do large buildings, we can fit 3 fans and do even more airflow. So it's a specialized fan with a really the calibrated flow. So we know exactly how much air we are blowing out, and we know that that much air is leaking back in. In Canada, we do a multi-point test. So we take pressure readings at multiple pressures, which lets us get a much more accurate reading using the math inside the software that we use.
You ready to test?
Okay, now Rob, you have to crawl through.
All right, sounds good.
You could screw the door up. Or you could use your back door.
There you go.
So we're using a Minneapolis door from the Energy Conservatory with the new DG1000 Digital gauge. This is a nice gauge because it lets us connect to our phones. We can actually run automated testing sometimes in some conditions, and we can connect it to our computers to do really careful data log. For some of our more investigative testing. So this is a very sensitive manometer, taking the pressure readings for the house and taking the pressure of the fan. By measuring the pressure inside the fan, we get the airflow through the fan. And that airflow measurement out has to balance what comes in, and so now we know the air leakage. So this is an infrared camera. We use it for thermography, so we're actually measuring the heat coming off of objects, the energy coming off of objects, and the camera provides us the temperature readings of that. So each one of the pixels in our screen is really one temperature reading. So we're getting 80,000 temperature readings every time we take an image. And so right away we can start to see the difference between the insulated wall cavity and the cold frame corner where all the wood is. We like to scan the house before and after we've been running the blower door to create that air leakage so that we can see the effect of air leakage during the test. You know, as a thermographer, we start to get familiar with what the patterns start to look like on the camera. So cold air often looks like kind of fingers of air leakage, cold areas. A damp area kind of looks like a bloom with soft edges. Cold, hard lines make you think missing insulation or a big thermal bridge. So you get familiar with what the camera's telling you. It's not just the camera though, it's the training and experience to go into using it. It's just a tool. So we see a lot of bad thermography because you can be tricked by reflections. So a mirror or a piece of metal is actually not hot, it's reflecting your body heat back at you. So you'd read that and think, well, that thing is really hot, we should be careful. And you realize it's just reflective. So you go through a whole training certification process to learn how to use a camera well. And it's a really nice, non-invasive investigating tool. So we can see cold corner where the framing is. We can see the studs at each line. And then as we get to the window, we can see the cold window frame, spacer. The glass is actually reflective. So it's bouncing that heat around. We have to take that into account. So when you have a home inspector come with just an IR camera, they could look at something and just see normal warm surface temperatures. And that's really the warm air leaking up past that hole. Once you turn on the blower door, you're reversing that. So now you're pulling the cold air down past that spot, and the IR camera in combination with the blower door brings up these really clear images and really see the difference of air leakage versus an insulation issue. Yeah. You know, we need to have ideally 10 degrees difference in temperature between inside and out. Today we have more than enough. You can see that 11 degree temperature in the corner there. You know, that's really why we often feel so uncomfortable around the windows, because their surface temperature is so much colder than our body temperature. Our bodies really read that radiant cold. It's pulling heat directly off your skin. So it gives you that uncomfortable feeling. Air leakage just exasperates that.
Yeah, get Robin there.
Hothead.
So I'm curious what you think, now that you've gone around and done an initial thermal scan, what you think the air changes are going to be in the house.
I think it's going to be high. I think we're going to have probably about 2,500 CFM of leakage. So that's how much air the blower door is going to be sucking. And a house this size, that'll probably translate into a 5 or 7 air change.
Yeah, so about 1,800 square feet. I don't know what the volume is, but
yeah, it could be pretty high.
Yeah, I'm thinking like at least 8.
You know, we've got some big flues from the fireplaces. We've got a crawl space that's probably not very well sealed. We've got a vaulted ceiling with those knee areas, probably not really well sealed. So it adds up. And this isn't that old of a house, really, 1990s. So an average new home, the building code in Canada says 3.2 air changes or 2.5 air changes, depending on your code pathway. I think construction over the last few years probably averaged about 4 or 5 air changes in new construction. If you looked across Canada, across North America, the warmer the climate, the leakier the homes. And you'd easily see 10 air changes on coastal homes and that kind of thing.
I know Tyler explained this, but basically every air change that happens in this climate, we get to minus 40 here, where Fahrenheit and Celsius are friends. Not every year, but it's not uncommon. And so every air change means I have to pay to heat that air up. If it's 10 air changes per hour, I got to pay for 10 heatings per hour. So you're basically like putting money into your pocket, and there's holes in the bottom, and they're just falling out into the ground. And then, you know, people will be able to turn a blind eye to that because we heat our homes generally with a fuel that can melt steel. So it's like cutting butter with a chainsaw. Like using a fuel that burns at 1200 degrees Celsius to heat a house to 21 is a mismatch of resources. And on top of that, you know, what are we today? Like $1.50 a gigajoule or something ridiculous. Like basically it's free. So a gigajoule is equivalent to 277 Olympians operating at full capacity for 10 hours. And we pay about $1.50 for that. So imagine you have 277 Olympians on treadmills, and they work their butts off for 10 hours, and then you hand them $1.50 and say, split it between yourselves and don't spend it in one place. So energy is basically free. And so engineers don't need to know where south is, because we have this seemingly endless amount of energy that we can just pump into these houses. And there's no feedback mechanism, because we pay more money for the pipes to get it here than we do for the actual substance. That's going to change, though. Like, just to put it in perspective, in North America, we have a massive pipeline going to the coast right now, which is going to suck Alberta dry. That's going to go to an LNG port. And all of our coal facilities are getting phased out in Alberta, and I think Saskatchewan probably too, which means that all that electricity that was generated with coal is not going to get generated with natural gas. So back when, I think, probably just before we met, at first when I was still in the patch. Gas was like 15, 16 bucks a GJ in like 2007, 2008. So 15 times more expensive than it is right now. So I think we're going back there. It's just a matter of when. I'm not going to predict when that's going to happen, but
it's a commodity, right? It's a global commodity, and they're not going to sell it to us locally for much cheaper than the commodity price demands. Mm-hmm. So when you have so many plants switching over to gas power, big pipelines going in, you're right, the cost is only going to go up.
Yep. And so not only will the gas price go up, but the electricity price is going to go up because the gas price will go up, which will drive the electricity price up. It's like this cyclical thing. And the other thing is that the time to get this stuff sorted out is on the front end, not in the middle, and probably not on the end, because once energy efficiency starts to become mainstream again, just a couple of years ago we were working on a project. It was tough to get you guys onto the project because you were so busy doing everybody else's stuff, and there's just not a lot of capacity with the energy efficiency within the industry of energy efficiency yet, because we get this knee-jerk reactions going on with the politics where 1 minute they're interested in energy efficiency and then they decide that they're not interested and they decimate the industry, and so there's nobody trained up to do this work locally. And so that's why I called Tyler up and said, let's get ahead of the curve, because I kind of know what's going to be happening. I've got a bit of an inside track with kind of where the government's going, and I bet you in 6 months this guy is going to be absolutely pinned with what's coming down the pipeline. So let's check this out, check our hypothesis and see if we're close. Okay, so propane truck just showed up, and we're getting our tanks filled up. Typically in the past we were using about 3 800-gallon tanks a year. Well, that's what the past people were using. So that's 2,400 gallons a year. Now, one of those tanks, just to kind of put that into perspective, people are like, well, 800 gallons, it's just propane. But 800 gallons of propane is equivalent to 270,000 man-hours of labor in terms of the amount of energy embodied in one tank. So that's a quarter of a human life. And so if you think about it, in 1 year, I use 3/4 of a human life. So if I had one guy on a treadmill running at 100%, I'd have to basically use 3/4 of a human life every single year to keep this house warm, which is why I know that it's pretty bad. We have a high efficiency furnace, yet we're using that much fuel. It's pretty unbelievable. There's a huge misunderstanding with the amount of energy that people use on a daily basis, which is why what Tyler does is so important. And what he just mentioned about home inspections, I'm curious, Tyler, do you guys do home inspections for people? So if somebody's looking for a new house, would you guys be interested in or able to go and help people?
Our being an energy advisor is so specific, we just do energy advising. But more and more homeowners are actually calling us in as part of their contract process when buying a new house to be parallel to the home inspector. So the home inspector is looking for structural issues, major maintenance concerns, things that are outside of our scope, where we just focus on the energy efficiency. Because it's really a hidden second mortgage, right? You move into a house, you don't really know how much energy it's going to use until you've done an energy analysis, and you don't want to be surprised by that first January heating bill.
In the 1980s, I think it was during the embargoes, they had an energy rating on houses. I think it was part of the mortgage requirement. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's going to happen again with the 2030 kind of net zero initiatives that are starting to really ramp up now.
I mean, the oil embargo, late 70s, I mean, that really kicked off all of this stuff. So the blower door was invented then here in Canada. You had a lot of research into high performance homes starting to happen in 79, 80, 81. And the R2000 program was launched in early 80s. And that was really a world-leading home energy program about how to build an energy-efficient standard house, how to do air tightness testing, the importance of ventilation. All those things really kicked off right in that 1980s era.
Okay, so this is the bay window, and it's an element that a lot of people like to have in their houses because you can put plants and stuff on here. They're one of the worst energy hogs in a house, and so Tyler's going to probably come and scan this and show us how bad it actually is. Below the bay window, we even had a little wood access, so you could put wood in from the outside, which is kind of funny because first of all, I actually caulked it up. I sealed it all up so that no air would come through it anymore. But with the amount of wood that this house consumes on a daily basis, basically I would just be outside kicking wood into that thing constantly. Like we're literally going through 5 to 8 armloads of wood per day just to keep this house warm. Now that allows us to keep the furnace off, but it really is an energy hog. So it's really nice to get that sense of how much we're actually consuming, so we can start to see progress as we make adjustments.
We're set right now to show blue and purple as colder, yellow and white as warmer, so you can see the temperature scale the camera's trying to adjust to here. So in lots of spots it's quite warm, but it drops all the way to 12 degrees. So you're seeing around the door where there's less insulation, we're seeing around the window frame, we're seeing a little gap, probably some air leakage around the door. And then you can see all the framing in the wall. It's reducing that insulation level. So first we're going to do a single point test just to give us an idea what the tightness is. So we want to run a baseline just to balance up the natural pressure on the house. You can see there's a little bit of pressure. It's just from the wind and the stack effect. Then we pick our ring for the size of the fan. So this is how much air the fan can move. The larger the ring, the more air. So I'm kind of guessing that we're going to be pretty leaky when I pick an A-ring. So now this is going to start taking air out of the house. We're going to see the pressure build here. So we want this number to get to minus 50. And then we'll see what the CFM is. We're already past this biased. $24.50.
So what do those numbers mean on the screen?
I had a good guess is what it means. I said 2500 CFM leakage was my guess. Came in at 2454. So that's 2,500 CFM of air, cubic feet per minute, being sucked out by the blower door. And that's being made up by all the gaps and all the holes and all the cracks in the house. So that's just our first test. Give us a sense of what we're looking at. Let's check what the air change might be quickly. So by looking at the volume that the blower door is pushing, we compare that to the volume of the house, and we can do the air change per hour calculation, which roughly works out to about 8 air changes for the house right now. So that means that air leakage is a big opportunity. We'd like to see the CFM come down typically to 500 CFM in a really energy efficient home. You're at 2,500 CFM right now, so you got a long way to bring that down. So that's a big opportunity. Air leakage is going to be a big part of your heat loss. It's convenient to get a quick read of where the house is at, and to be able to give a homeowner a little bit of information, but to really do the math and tell the computer an accurate calculation, we need to do a multi-point test. So now we're going to take the same pressure readings but at multiple levels, multiple pressures. So now that we're done the blower door test itself, we'll turn the fan back on, we'll let it run for another 15 minutes or so while we look for those air leaks. Some of them we'll be able to just feel with our hand. Hand is a great sensitive air leakage detector. We also have the infrared camera. So now that the cold air has been able to pass over some of these warmer surfaces, we'll start to see a change and those blue streaks that I talked about. Right, cool. So the fan's been creating negative pressure now for a few minutes. It's pretty cold outside, and so that cold air starts to affect the indoor surface temperatures, and we're trying to see that change in pattern. It's a really good indicator of air leakage pathways. It might be a little smaller. So you can see that pattern changed from the first shot and the shot now. That's kind of a pretty typical cold air pathway. A little bit of air getting around the bad insulation. Sometimes the pathway can be a little tricky, right? The hole on the outside is way over here, but 10 feet over is the hole on the inside. And the air leakage is smart. It'll find that path. And this chimney looks totally different. So there's the fingers of cold air. You can see the huge wash of cold air from the chimney. Because the chimney has that fire separation where it goes to the building, it often doesn't get well sealed. So there's probably a big gap there. And you can't put any kind of insulation there. It will have to be fire caulking and tin, mineral fiber maybe. See, that wasn't there before. You got an old fan there, allowing air leakage past. Sometimes our feet and our, the back of our neck is our best tools as well, right? So the bath fan is now letting leakage come back down. It's a really common one. Cold air coming around the window there. Cold air coming behind the baseboard. Back of the wall. So when we're seeing the air leakage come out, I was kind of standing here. So the before and after, this has gotten colder. It didn't actually change as much as I thought it was going to. You know, we didn't get, this whole opening didn't change too much. Just the whole area is cool. The crawl space hatch is not as leaky as I thought. Didn't see a big change there. We worry about crawl spaces and basements because that's a big source of soil gas.
And I haven't sealed it back up again, so I bet you there's a whack of air coming on there. Just a sense of how much.
Yeah, we're definitely getting. So it's all coming in there.
Yeah.
That's why it's not coming in here.
So that would indicate that the crawl space is quite leaky.
Whole crawl space is leaking. It's trying to come up the easiest hole.
Yeah.
There'd be other leakages all over the house maybe. We're just not seeing it. To look at where the chimney goes through.
Right.
Awesome. That was a.
That's what air leakage looks like.
The last owner did that.
So there's a big hole behind there. And then this is your fresh air that's really coming in to the house, but it has no control. You either get it, you get it every time the fan runs.
It's probably tons right there. I guess it's getting sucked into the system. So
It's being, pulled through the whole shebang. And then here, we're getting air being pulled right down the chimney.
mm-hmm.
Which is why we worry about depressurization risk. That's one of the tests we'll do before we take the fan down. Didn't look like that before.
Looks like we've got our first 4 ads. Great. I guess we just gotta see if break is on the switch there.
You can see now some cold air is coming down the electrical for the smoke detector. The light. Okay, so now we're looking right up above us at the light fixture. This was totally warm almost the same temperature before we ran the blower door. You can see the effect now. Without using the blower door and an infrared camera together, you miss half the story. So because this house has fireplaces in it and an old style water tank that has spillage susceptible flue, or a natural aspirating flue, we need to do a depressurization risk assessment. So this uses the same gauge. Now the blower door is off and sealed. And we're going to turn on some exhaust equipment to kind of naturally create that negative pressure in the house with fans to see if we hit depressurization limits that would be unsafe. Okay, so I'll go turn the fans on. So we're going to start turning on the fans now. We're going to do the range hood first, as one of the big ones in the house. So that increased the negative pressure 1 Pascal. Can I get the bathroom now?
Waiting to see if there's a difference in the numbers.
I do have another bathroom fan, but we're going to remove it. So
you don't have a dryer installed right now. Dryer's usually a fairly big fan. We only hit 1.5 negative. So what's happening is your house is so leaky that these fans can't depressurize the house. You're safe. It would be a very rare case of winds or something that would cause backdraft. But if you were to tighten up the house really carefully and leave that equipment in place, now this fan would be able to blow a lot more negative pressure. So that relationship is always between the amount of leakage and the size of the fan. So right now we call it spillage safe. We'd still recommend a carbon monoxide detector, of course, but no other concerns.
all right, so Tyler, what's the prognosis, doctor?
It's a home very typical of its age.
Yeah.
It has a lot of opportunities for energy efficiency. I think we're going to be able to save you a lot of wood cutting.
Perfect.
You know, predominantly, I think air leakage is one of your major energy losses. We saw that in the blower door test. You know, windows are going to be a big piece of your heat loss. And insulation, your house is well insulated for 1990s. But even then, that wasn't enough. And so adding some insulation is definitely going to be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a big change to your comfort levels as well. Because we saw some of those cold drafts coming in, the cold floor from the crawl space. All those are going to be taken care of in an energy retrofit.
We've been adapting to the lack of energy by doing Wim Hof, so
We just keep moving.
get more brown fat into our bodies. So what's really cool about Tyler's company is that they not only do all this energy auditing stuff and kind of get a baseline, but you guys are a full service drafting outfit. You guys do the design of high performance homes. We have a couple of clients actually working with Tyler right now, going through the process from start to finish. So not only do you guys do new builds, but you probably could have done an as-built on this for sure. And you probably can come back with the building science and recommendations. I happen to know some of that stuff, so I'm going to be doing my own drafting. In fact, I've already drafted the house up, and I kind of have a sense of how I'm going to deal with the issues that Tyler has now objectively quantified for me. But if you're kind of trying to figure out how to navigate the world of energy efficiency and building science, it's not as easy as it sounds, because you can put a whole bunch of insulation into your home. You can hire a tradesperson to come and do that, and they'll probably do a good job of it. But if they don't understand some of the consequences or nuances of doing that, you want to tell folks what can happen?
I mean, the first thing is just missed opportunity. Not enough insulation, expensive to go back.
Yeah.
The biggest risk is that you actually trap moisture in your wall, and you end up rotting out the wall really quickly. You know, the house might have been fine for 50 years, losing all that heat and losing all that humidity, but you change something. House as a system says you're choking it with moisture now, and the house starts to have moisture issues and damage, structural damage, within a few years.
Yeah, it's always so interesting for me. Like, you think about the fact that we just got about 8 to 10 air changes per hour through this house, which means I'm losing all that energy and all that money. But it also means that all that air that's moving through the wall is actually keeping the wall dry. And so you do need to think through all those decisions before you make it. And Tyler's one of the guys that can help you to do that. So I'm going to leave a link to Tyler's website in the show notes below. So make sure you head down there and check out his website. Like he said, he's got tons of information on his site. You guys used to teach courses too. Do you still
We do a
that?
lot of teaching, yeah.
Okay, online right now?
Yeah. CHBA BC is doing a lot of net zero courses with
Give
us
us
right
the
now.
acronym on that though.
Canadian Home Builder Association BC's branch.
Okay.
We'll be doing some webinar courses this spring, and we hope to relaunch our green building and beer events as soon as we're allowed, and probably be a hybrid digital in-person event starting up here in the summer.
Okay, and then did you guys not used to teach courses on this too for folks that are wanting to train up on energy efficiency?
I have taught energy advisors in the past, and a lot of the energy advisors in Alberta, I've taught over the years. We don't do it now. There's enough other courses to learn to be an EA,
Okay.
and we only teach our internal EAs now. We're busy enough just keeping up with our own growth.
Okay, and are you guys hiring?
We're starting to look at hiring in Edmonton and Kelowna right now as our company grows.
Awesome. Fantastic. Okay, guys. Well, I can't recommend Tyler enough. He definitely gets my personal stamp of approval. And please get in touch with him if you have any questions. And we'll see you guys in the next video.